You are listening to the Horse Radio Network, part of the Equine Network family.
What a beautiful day for horses in the morning.
You are listening to the #1 horse podcast in the world. Here is your entertaining look at the horse world and the people in it.
I'm Ashley Winch in Kansas City, Missouri, and you're listening to Horses in the Morning on the Horse Radio Network for Wednesday, January 24th, episode 3350. Good morning, Horse World! While Glenn, Jen, and I are soaking up some sunshine at Podfest Orlando, we are cracking open the podcast vault for a winter special. Brace yourselves for a time-traveling trip back to 2021, where we will revisit some winter wisdom from the pros when Steve Kraus talked about winter hoof care and Dr. Bryan Waldridge joined us to discuss frostbite in horses. Then, we will highlight a chat about the 5 stages of gray in winter. Before we jump in our Wayback Machine, a quick word from our friends at Daily Dose.
I'm here with the mad scientist who developed Daily Dose equine horse feeds, Janet Geyer. And I wanted to have a quick chat with you because Daily Dose equine horse feeds are non-GMO whole food nutrition based. And a lot of people go, oh, that comes from a small dedicated feed mill. I won't be able to get that when I travel. They're wrong, aren't they?
They are. You can get it through Chewy anywhere in the United States. Or if you live locally in Maryland and Northern Virginia, you can get it delivered.
There you go. Chewy.com. It will deliver it anywhere you want. You can also schedule delivery in advance so you can have it delivered every X number of days. And you can go in there to your account and change it every time you move horse show venues. So check it out today, dailydoseequine.com online or chewy.com.
Now grab your hot cocoa, snuggle up close, and let's hop in the podcast time machine for a winter wellness adventure you won't want to miss. Speaking of staying warm, be sure to check out everything currently on sale at statelinetack.com. I was currently looking at some blankets and I saw every brand from Amigo to Horseware Ireland, Rhino, Weatherbeeta, Tough Rider, and more. Of course, coming in every color because why have a horse if you can't accessorize? And don't forget about your dog too. They have dog blankets available as well. And currently they're offering 20% off of orders over $29 and 30% off of orders over $129. Don't delay. Head over to statelinetack.com today. And thank you to statelinetack.com for continuing to sponsor our show. Speaking of, let's get on with it.
A guest back with us, it's Steve Kraus, head of Farrier Services over at Cornell University. We had him on actually talking about this a little bit ago, but Jennifer wanted us to replay it today. And what it's talking about is winter hoof care and whether you're to shoe or not to shoe over the winter. And I remember this conversation was a terrific conversation, and it's timely because it's getting chilly. So here is Steve Kraus.
We have Steve Kraus, the head of Farrier Services at Cornell University, and Steve has been on our show a ton, and he has a wealth of knowledge about the hoof. So we wanted to talk to you a little bit about the myths surrounding hoof care. And I think if we're going to... Do you need a sec?
Yeah, I'm good.
Get in your car, close the door, turn the heat on. It's cold outside, I'm sure.
Yes, I just did.
Great. Well, I think one of the biggest questions that people have as far as coming into the winter season is, should you pull your horse's shoes in the winter because they have better traction in the snow and ice barefoot versus wearing a shoe? And what is your, as somebody who really hasn't ever lived in a snowy area, but I'm in a place now where there is going to be snow, I would love to know the answer to this question.
Well, this is a common question, and this is a kind of a multiple answer here. So where we live in upstate New York, it does snow, but it doesn't snow all the time. It used to snow all the time, and I think maybe, climate varies back and forth. Sometimes we have snowy, icy winters, and other times we have very open but cold winters. So what happens in like November, people ask me if I'm the weatherman. When is it gonna snow? Because they're thinking of putting traction on and anti-snowball pads and so on. And, do you think it's going to snow soon? Or you think it's, what kind of winter? So I'm a horseshoer. I'm not the weatherman. So I'm like, in the end of November, I'm not going to see you till January. And we do get a lot of snow anytime after Thanksgiving. And that's what we did this year. But who knows what it's going to do? So if you're going to prepare for winter, now's the time to start doing it in the snowy climates. So that's the beginning of this. So again, climate and moisture and how much snow really affects what we really need. First, I want to say is if the horses are on a constant snowpack and are not being used for anything, not doing any kind of real work, the feet hold up the best on a nice constant snowpack. Well, we always don't get that. But if we have the freeze-thaw cycle, if we have a lot of ice, a steel shoe without any other traction device is slippery on ice and can be slippery on snow. So yes, a horse without shoes is probably safer than a horse with steel shoes without any traction. But however, on ice and hard-packed snow and crossing roads, if you're trail riding, some type of traction is definitely more safe and useful to using the horse if you apply it properly. Mm-hmm. And then if you're going to shoe the horse, and it's snowy, then you also need some type of pad to reduce the snow buildup. Because what happens is we call it snowballing. We have the slight warmth that radiates from the horse's foot melts a little bit of snow and then freezes it to the steel, and then it cakes up into what we call a snowball. So some type of pad, like a polyurethane flat pad or a bubble pad, which is called a snowball pad, stops that from happening. But what I like the best for this is what's called a no-snow rim pad, which is a rim pad that goes on with this rubber tube or polyurethane tube that goes around the inside rim, and that insulates the hoof from the snow and doesn't let them melt. Plus, it's flexible. And if you have a freeze-thaw winter, then you don't have this muddy, snowy, slushy soup migrating underneath the flat pad. So it keeps the foot open when there's no snow, and you don't get a buildup of things that rot the foot away. And then when there is snow, it keeps the snow from building up. And so pads and studs are quite a big item in the Northeast this time of year.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm glad I don't have to deal with all that. I'm down in Oklahoma, so we will get some snow and then it'll melt and then we'll get some slush and some mud. So yeah, interesting to think about. And to think about, you would see somebody in November, but really not see them again until February. And that leads me to another question that people have is, do the horses, the hoof growth, does it slow down in the winter?
Yes. From what I have seen, and my observation is mostly in the Northeast, as we start to lose daylight, and that starts happening in June, the end of summer solstice, the feet react and start slowing down by the end of the summer into fall. And as we get into this time of year, again, the horses, hormones react to the length of day. So feet are slowing down in December and January, and there's a month or so lag behind the actual, the solstice. And then I've noticed with horses, especially horses that are inside, and we have a lot of indoor arenas around here, they're turned out a little bit, but they're not grazing any, or there's nothing to eat, growing yet. The feet really start speeding up in growth at the end of March and April, and they'll grow probably twice as much in April and May than they've had in the 3 previous months.
Interesting.
Especially thoroughbred horses who need more energy to stay warm, and they're putting it into their coats and so on. So my observation over like the last 50 years around here has been this slowing of growth on not all horses, but most of them that I've worked on during the winter months, and then speeding up in spring, and then slowing down by the end of the summer into fall. So with some horses, you would go to redo them on a 6-week schedule, and you would get there and you would look like nothing has grown. It's not worth redoing them. Not worth trimming them. So that, it kind of varies to the individual horse too, but also the climate is going to have an influence too. I know if down in Wellington and South Florida and Ocala, the feet are probably growing a bit quicker down here. They have more warmth. They're probably on the more moisture. So that's going to influence more hoof growth too.
I was going to ask you that because we live in Florida, and I was wondering, does it do the same thing for the horses that live here full time, all year?
I think in the more in the Northeast and throughout the upper Midwest and so on, you do have a change of seasons that's very noticeable, and whereas in Florida especially, you have more constant moisture conditions and so on, and that I don't think the horses are going to respond to that length of day change as much, and plus they're probably being exercised more down there too. There's more activity in Florida over the winter, so exercise, nutrition, all that stuff combines with the the length of day also. So a lot of factors, not just one thing, but we noticed in the Northeast the slowing of the growth during the winter.
Is there a benefit to hot shoeing versus cold shoeing, especially in the winter?
Well, the main benefit, well, lots of good benefits to hot shoeing. What I like about hot shoeing during the winter, it keeps my hands warm.
That's funny.
And we could go out on some of these days, and a lot of us keep pretty busy shoeing all kinds of horses during the winter, and having that forge going is a nice heat source. You can warm your tools up a little bit, and if you pound on cold metal during this kind of cold weather, the metal is even actually a little bit harder to work when you get into the 20s and less, if you're going to be out there. So hot shoeing is a benefit to shaping the shoes itself, especially as you get out of the light shoes and get into standard and wide web rim shoes. They're not going to shape very well cold and easily, especially in the cold weather. So you need the forge to shape them properly and to do any modifications. So that's hot shaping. Hot fitting is taking that shoe while it's warm and checking the fit, burning a clip in. And the benefits of hot fitting is you can do your final flattening of the foot if you have a perfectly flat shoe and have a little bit of an imperfection in the sole in the wall surface. You can actually singe that and burn a little bit away or leave a mark for you to rasp. But it, again, in climate has a huge influence on the benefits of hot fitting. So again, down in South Florida, where you're very moist, you not only have, in some cases, excessive moisture, but you also have lots of fungi and bacteria that like to eat away at the hoof. So when you hot fit, you are killing that bacteria, number one. You are also sealing off the bottom of the foot because the horn tubules are like little straws. And if you notice, if you trim a horse's foot and they're standing on a flat surface and the horse picks his foot up after a minute, there's an imprint of moisture where the foot was. Mm-hmm. So you see all this moisture is coming in, running out of the foot or ability to move too much. So what the guys who shoe regularly down in South Florida will do, they will hot fit for the reason of sealing those horn tubules off, which tightens up the foot, makes it a little bit stronger. And it also kills all the fungi and bacteria that are trying to invade. So the problem you run into, and these guys down there are so smart, they figured out how to get around this. If you are shoeing a lot of performance horses with aluminum shoes, the aluminum cannot get hot enough to do a good hot fit. So those guys down there in Wellington invented what they call the hot plate. And so they put a hoof-shaped piece of steel plate in the forge to heat that up, and they have a little notch they can fit their tongs into, and they actually hot fit a plate onto the foot before they nail their aluminum shoe on to kind of reproduce that hot fitting a steel shoe would do. Isn't that ingenious?
That's really smart. They made it work for them. Well, one more question, Steve.
Right.
We're running out of. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, again, they're just solving a problem, and they find the feet hold up better.
That's fantastic. Very cool. Before we let you go, one more question, because I know I deal with a lot of off-the-track thoroughbreds, and I know a lot of our listeners do too. And it's a question about horses that have really low heels. Some people think that they might have been trimmed too short. Is that the case, or is it conformation, and can it be fixed?
It's more of a conformation problem. A lot of thoroughbreds off the track have developed in front what's called a flat or negative palmar angle, and behind we call that a plantar angle, and that's the angle of the bottom of the coffin bone with the ground. And that is a bit of a conformation problem. So the horse is actually, instead of having a positive of 4 to 6 degree coffin bone angle with the ground, it's either flat or negative. And that compresses the digital cushion and makes for what we call the low-heeled horse. And so the thing you do not want to do without looking at the horse is just wedge it up, because the horse is already hitting his heels too hard. Sometimes you just got to bring the support further back or do some frog pressure to help the bony column, because the horse is actually sinking backwards in his hoof capsule.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, people always want to you should put a wedge on that. But to me, first of all, you put the wedge in it and they're hitting that heel more. And I feel like sometimes if you wedge it up, the fetlock drops even more, putting more.
Correct. Exactly. That's the biomechanics. You got that 100% right. And a lot of people get that 100% wrong and do the opposite thing. And then they create problems.
So if you're listening, first of all, Steve Kraus just said I was right.
I was just going to say, she is going to use that. I'm going to have to take it out as a soundbite and use it forever.
No, but you explained it exactly the way I would explain it.
So if you guys are, you have a horse with really low heels, do not let a farrier put a wedge pad on it, because conformationally that fetlock will drop and put more stress on the suspensory ligaments and more stress on the bottom of that heel. So just keep that in mind, because I've heard so many people say, you got to put a wedge pad on it. No, don't do that. And I'm going to end with Steve Kraus telling me that I was right. Thank you. Oh, Steve, it's always so awesome having you on, because you explain things in a way that we can all understand. And I really appreciate your time. Where can people, if they want to contact you, find you, or where can people find out more about Cornell University Farrier Program?
Well, we have a Facebook page, Cornell Farrier Program on Facebook, easy to find. They can contact me. Email is sek78@cornell.edu. And they can go on the Cornell Veterinary College's website and search for farrier. You can find all kinds of stuff about us. So we have a great program here, and we train a lot of farriers, and some of which are working down in Wellington this winter. So, we're quite busy here.
We call those the lucky ones, Steve.
Right.
Fantastic. Have a great holiday.
Give me a way to visit them.
Yeah, good point. And here I am with Dr. Bryan Waldridge, known by a lot of the horse world as Dr. B's Bluegrass on Facebook, a veterinarian from Central Kentucky who has this really cool Facebook page that he puts all kinds of interesting posts on about his many adventures there in Kentucky as a horse vet. Welcome back to the show, Dr. B.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much for asking me.
Today, as we record this, the entire United States seems to be well and truly frozen. So I thought it might be timely to chat a little bit about frostbite, because horses can get frostbite too. So maybe we should start with, what is frostbite?
So frostbite is really the effects on the body, and usually it's the extremities. So the places we worry about are the ears and the feet, and occasionally the tail. The extremities of the body where there's less blood flow, so those spots are more sensitive to cold damage. And when cold damage occurs, it can both actually freeze those cells, but also it damages the blood vessels, so there's less blood flow to those areas. And that's why sometimes when you add a sequela of frostbite is, excuse me, that you'll see skin sloughage and changing colors of the skin where it looks like a burn, turns blue or turns black.
So is frostbite literally frozen? So if a horse or a human, for that matter, has frostbite on the tip of their ear, is that actually a frozen ear, or is it a little more complex than that?
It can be truly frozen. If the blood flow is compromised to the point that blood can no longer go to that area, then it will go ahead and freeze, because the blood's going to be our way to warm that tissue. So in the worst case, where we have the damage to the blood vessel and the tissue becomes devitalized or dies, then that can go ahead and freeze. So, less degrees of frostbite, but the ones we want to have is maybe where there's just some cold damage and we warm those tissues up. It may be red and painful for a few days, but goes away. And the bad end of the spectrum would be no blood flow and dead tissue that's eventually going to slough off.
Ew, this would be yucky. Okay, that's step one. Now, step two, obviously, horses don't get frostbite all the time. Horses live in all parts of the country, all over the world, where it gets really, 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 really cold. So under what circumstances would a horse be at risk for frostbite?
To me, and this thing I always talk to clients, because we've gotten a lot of calls on this because it's really cold in Kentucky right now, is we worry about what's the horse's overall body condition. Because really those pretty young, good body condition horses, you don't tend to see it as much in. So if they have good body condition, they're less likely to get frostbite, although that's not always true. And then do we have conditions that make the horse more likely to have cold stress? So really the two big ones in that is wind, because we all know about, when they're doing the weather report telling you what the wind chill is. I don't even listen to that anymore in Kentucky because it's always terrible. But what's the wind chill going to be? And then things like getting wet, because you get wet, you get colder because you've got wet. So now you get more heat loss. So if horses have a wind block and a spot they can get out of the rain or the snow, then they're less likely to show those signs. And as a rule, but not always true, if they're a kind of a younger, healthier horse and they've had time to adapt to that change in weather, the horse has been in the cold area for quite a while and had time for the season to gradually change, then those tend to do all right. If we took a horse from California and dropped them right in the middle of Kentucky right now, they're definitely going to show cold stress.
So cold stress, and this is something that I used to struggle with a lot back in the day when I took care of lots of other people's horses. A horse is designed, and humans are too, actually. Mammals are designed so that as Mother Nature's seasons change, they change relatively gradually, and their body adjusts to it so that in the middle of summer, when the average daytime temperature is 85 degrees, if you pick that horse up and magically drop him someplace else where the average daytime temperature is 40, that horse is going to experience cold stress because his body has not had the chance to adjust to it, versus that same horse could live in a place where in the summertime it's 80 degrees on average in the summer. And then in the winter, the average temperature is 12 degrees. And that horse will be just fine because he's experiencing the seasonal change and his body is hardwired to make those adjustments.
Right, they've had time to adapt to it. And hair coat is...
That's part of it.
greatly more influenced by, right, it's greatly influenced by duration of light in the day. So that's the biggest contributor to it, but also if they're in cold, they're going to tend to grow a heavier hair coat, but so they may not have as good a coat, neglecting the effects that decreasing sunlight would have, which should trigger a heavier hair coat.
Right. And then you have the effect of, I just watched this on Mythbusters the other day. When the body gets cold, whether it's a human or a horse, the body will reduce circulation to the extremities in order to preserve core body temperature so that they don't become hypothermic, thus contributing to poor circulation in the extremities, which keeps them even colder.
Right.
But your horse can't put on mittens.
That's one of the frostbite things. No, they can't. No, and although if they had those in the horse catalogs, they would wear them.
They would sell. Yeah, I would buy some. Absolutely. So, say we're having a cold snap, or you have a horse in that you think might be at risk. Maybe he's older, not so prone to moving around and keeping himself warm, doesn't particularly care for eating lots of hay and all those things. How might I suspect that, my horse might have frostbite? What would I look for?
So coldness would be one of the things, is that tissue. And I always kind of go back to their foot to control, to be when I'm trying to think, is this horse's, we'll just use ear as an example, or the other day I checked a horse's sheath to see if it may be having some frostbite. So I'll always go back to the feet, because it seems like the blood flow there kind of would tell you what the extremities are up to. So I'll go feel their foot, say, okay, what does that feel like? Then go up to their ear and say, does the ear feel a lot colder? Then that would worry me. If it felt inordinately, I shouldn't use such high words with more than two syllables, colder from the ear to the foot, I think, well, that's a little bit worrisome, because he should be maintaining that blood flow better. And then is there pain? When you feel that area, is the horse painful? Because with frostbite, they're generally going to show those two things where, if it's just a cold day, it may feel cold, but the horse shouldn't show any pain. You may see swelling too, because of that decreased blood flow. The fluid can't get back into the circulation.
So you go out.
And color change. I should say color change.
Yeah, which is harder to tell on your horses. So whenever you're going out and it's a frigid, nasty weather, you're worried about your senior citizen, and you go out there and you go, oh boy, his ears are very, very chilly, and he is unusually upset about me fussing with his ears. He usually doesn't mind. What's my next step?
Well, then we decide, can we bring the horse? If there's a worry of it and the horse is showing discomfort, then how do we get them out of the cold? So do they have a windbreak, or are they wet where they need to come in out of the weather? And then, if they're not wearing a blanket, then that would be a time to think about a blanket to try and just make that core body temperature be higher or maintain it better, and potentially help the extremities stay a bit warmer.
Okay, so we're going back to that core body temperature by helping the core body temperature comfortably and easily stay normal versus stressing and struggling to stay normal. We're allowing the body to naturally improve the blood flow back towards those extremities.
Yes, and it depends a little bit on size too. Like, you may worry about it more in a mini than you would
true. He's got
an adult normal size horse.
Yeah, it's a tiny little thing.
Because really the smaller animals have a greater surface area compared to their body weight than a larger animal. So because of that greater surface area, they're more likely to lose heat.
Yeah. So we've brought our horse over, and we've brought him into the barn, and we're going to walk him around a little bit, help him warm, put a nice big puffy warm blanket on him. We're going to use ears as an example because it's easy. Would it be a good idea to rub his ears, put mittens on his ears, pour some hot water on his ears? What should we do?
So I think rubbing them, putting something on there, water, because that's going to promote heat loss. I probably wouldn't do that. And if one of the responses to heat can also be blood vessel constriction. So I would, as much as possible, let them passively warm themselves by rubbing them or covering them up.
There we go. So at what point is it better call the vet?
For sure, a color change. If you saw that tissue is purpley and everybody's seen those pictures where the people get terrible frostbite, starts to turn black.
Yeah, they're icky.
That's they are terrible. That shows there's been significant tissue damage, and so if they don't respond within an hour or two, then it's probably time to have it looked at. But color change would be bad, continued pain would be bad, and then the rest of the horse feels pretty warm, and that tip of that ear still feels really cold, and that would signal there may be something going on blood flow wise.
There we go. Very interesting. So bring him in, help him get that core body temperature comfortably and consistently back to normal, and make sure he's got some forage and plenty of hydration. Can dehydration play a role in susceptibility?
Well, it sure can. It would. Animal would have to be fairly well dehydrated, but still, if they have lower blood volume, is going to be lower perfusion to the rest of the body. So, if we're normally hydrated, then hopefully our blood volume is going to be as it should be, which would help keep the tissues perfused and warm.
There we go. Well, fascinating stuff, and as I said, timely, considering that as we record, the entire country seems to be dipping below norms. So thank you again, Dr. B, for stopping by and telling us all about really great horse health topics. Where can folks follow your many, many Central Kentucky adventures online?
So I'm on the Facebook, Dr. B's Bluegrass, and have pictures of the things I run into every day and some of the horses I'm lucky enough to see fairly often, that everybody can come and enjoy Kentucky from afar.
There we go. Well, thank you very much for coming on, and we will see you again soon.
For the first time, I think since I was 7 years old, which was just a few years ago, I have a gray horse, and you guys wrote, y'all wrote an article about the 5 stages. It says the 5 stages of grays in the winter, but it's kind of in the middle there. It's grief in the winter. So, yes, gray horses are beautiful. And the good news is mine has, because he came directly off the track, has been in a from ears to tail blanket the entire time I've owned him practically. So the only thing that's really dirty is his cheeks and his jowls, because he rubs those on the ground. But that is, I'm in big trouble come spring.
Oh, yeah, you are. And I have to say, this article, that this 5 stages of grief / grays in the winter is probably one of, I'm not supposed to play favorites, but it's probably one of my favorites that we've had in a while. And part of it is I just love the play on the 5 stages of grief. The other part is that, my writer, Kristen Brennan, just, I love kind of her self-deprecating humor and her willingness to totally make fun of herself.
Yeah. On our yearly late Indian summer day, I scrub him head to toe one final time, admire my work as he glows in the sunlight, and I think to myself, this year is going to be the one. At that point, she's in denial. And then comes the next stage. Why don't you tell us what it is?
Which is anger. And, the first couple of times the horse comes in just covered head to foot in mud. She goes, I can feel my blood pressure rise. Eventually the frustration wins out. And before I know it, I'm standing on my front porch screaming over and over again. Why? Marcus, of course, looks at me with what's the problem as he drops to roll again.
Stage 3 is bargaining, because you realize anger is futile and you find yourself in the 3rd stage of coping. The negotiations are small, an extra treat in exchange for less rolls that day. I had a horse, a bay horse. His name was Groot. And bless his new owner's heart. I always said, every time I saw that horse, I was like, thank God you're not gray. Because that was the biggest mud pig I ever had seen. And looks like her horse is the same, because stage 4, Deanne, is
depression. She says, by late winter, my once beautiful steed is now a what feels like permanent shade of mud, and the 4th stage of coping sets in. And I feel like that is accurate on so many levels. 1, because you just accept that your gray horse is not gray for the winter. And then 2, like, you're at that point in the year where it's just gray and gross out anyway. So you might as well just lump it all in together.
Yeah, I feel like what happened, fortunately for me, was the horse came pretty quickly off the racetrack. So he's still very gray and beautiful when I take the blanket off. But as soon as I take it off, I'm pretty sure he's just going to go absolutely nuts. And the stage 5 is acceptance. And that's when you just give up. I was thinking like maybe next year I can bathe him right before on the day it starts to get cold and put the blanket on him and see him in the spring.
And call it a day.
Yeah, exactly. So
and it's funny because I have not gray horses, and it's not just that I can't see it. They're also just not mud balls. Mm-hmm. Right? Like on the occasion that my chestnut comes in with a little bit of mud scrape like stuck to her, it's like on one side of her rump, or like or just a little bit on her cheek. And here I am like 10 minutes later ready to ride, and my friend with her gray is like still currying off the first quarter of her horse.
I don't understand. Is it the fact that it just shows more? Is it the fact that gray horses legit don't want to be spotted by predators, so they're like, let's make ourselves brown?
Ooh, I like that legitimacy. I'm going to go with that. But I just think it's a spite thing.
It sounds good to be like, I'm trying to cover myself. It's like people with paint horses. They always say the white parts of their paint horse get the dirtiest, Well, duh. They're trying to cover up those white spots.
And I feel like, obviously, if you run your hand along your brown horse, your brown horse is not clean. Like, it's like your hand comes away dirty.
But you can't see the stains.
So, yes. And I'm like, that wasn't a poop stain. We'll just curry that right away.
Yeah, it's sad when my gray horse's blanket, like the first blanket I put on him, somebody ripped from about mid flank all the way to the liner on the back. So that blanket is pretty much toast. But then the next, I just put his other lighter blanket on him because the snow's gone, and it's red, but now it's actually just mud, like the whole thing. So I know what I'm in for once the blanket is removed, but I'm just trying to stave it off as long as possible.
One of the things I loved in Kristen's article too is that she says, I look at photos of other people's horses in the snow and like the jealousy, I can't handle it, basically. Because it's so beautiful and mine just find mud.
Thanks for traveling back to 2021 with me. I hope that you enjoyed our winter special. Tomorrow we have a fresh new episode of Horse Husbands coming to an RSS feed near you. And Friday, Jamie will be joined by Lisa Wysocki. That's right, it's going to be a girls only show. Now get out there and ride your horse.